Power is not taken by shouting, it is taken by moving in plain sight. From emperors to industrialists, the same 36 stratagems kept winning. Hide intent in routine. Strike where they cannot afford to lose. Borrow another man's blade. Wait while they burn out. If you are ambitious, this is your playbook. Let's begin. Sneak across the ocean in broad daylight. Power is not always taken by force. Sometimes the boldest deception is done in plain sight. The first stratagem teaches us this. What is familiar becomes invisible, and what is visible becomes harmless. The story comes from Emperor Taizong of the Tang dynasty. He feared the sea so much that he refused to sail into battle. His general Shui Rengui tricked him. The emperor was invited to a feast. Days passed. The food and wine flowed, and only when he heard the crash of waves did he realize the truth. He had been on a ship the entire time. By then, the fleet was already in open water. The mission succeeded because fear had been bypassed, not confronted. The lesson is timeless. Hide your intentions inside the ordinary. If you want to make a bold move, don't cloak it in mystery. Cloak it in routine. People rarely question what they see every day. Robert Baden-Powell, besieged at Mafeking during the Boer War, defended a small force of 1,500 against 8,000. He set up fake forts, fake minefields, and even circulated false letters. The enemy believed what was visible, and that belief kept them frozen. Think about it. In life, business, and even politics, the greatest dangers are not the obvious threats. The obvious is expected, prepared for, guarded against. But the move that comes wrapped in normality, repeated until it seems dull, is the one that strikes hardest. If you want power, learn this. The best secrets are carried out in daylight. Besiege Wei to rescue Zhao. The second stratagem is about indirect pressure. When the enemy is too strong head-on, you don't fight where he is ready, you strike where he is weak. The story comes from the Warring States period. The state of Wei laid siege to Zhao. Zhao's army was on the verge of collapse. Instead of charging directly into Wei's forces, General Sun Bin advised a different approach. He marched his army straight toward Wei's capital. Instantly, Wei's generals panicked. They lifted the siege of Zhao and rushed home to protect their own heartland, only to be ambushed and destroyed on the way. Never wrestle with a stronger opponent on his chosen ground. Instead, attack what he loves, what he must defend, and force him to move on your terms. This is not just war, it is life. When Rockefeller fought rival oil refiners, he didn't always compete in their strongest markets. He cut supply lines, controlled rail transport, and squeezed them in places they didn't expect. By threatening their foundation, he forced them to yield without a direct clash. Men lose battles not because they are weak, but because they fight on the wrong ground. You must always ask yourself, what does my enemy value most? Where is he unguarded? That is where you strike. Sometimes the fastest way to save a friend, or yourself, is not to fight the enemy in front of you, but to endanger the ground beneath his feet. Kill with a borrowed knife. Power often lies not in your own hands, but in your ability to make others act for you. The third stratagem teaches this. When you lack the strength to strike directly, you borrow the blade of another. In ancient China, one warlord wished to eliminate his rival, but feared the backlash. Instead of striking himself, he whispered rumors into the ear of a powerful ally. The ally, convinced his own interests were threatened, did the killing. The warlord's enemy was destroyed, and his own hands remained clean. This principle echoes through history. During the Gilded Age, J.P. Morgan rarely fought competitors directly. Instead, he used bankers, newspapers, and even politicians as his borrowed knives. They carried out his battles while he appeared above the fray. Even in personal life, the same law applies. If you confront someone openly, you reveal yourself and risk retaliation. But if you maneuver others through influence, persuasion, or manipulation to act in your place, you gain results without exposure. It is a reminder of the shadow side of power. You don't always need to swing the sword yourself. Influence can make other men cut for you. So remember this law. The most dangerous warrior is not the one with the sharpest blade, but the one who knows how to place it in another man's hand. Wait at leisure while the enemy labors. The fourth stratagem is about patience and positioning. It teaches that victory belongs to the side that makes the enemy exhaust himself before the real fight begins. In the Warring States period, armies often clashed after long marches. The clever generals arranged their men to rest on high ground, with supplies secured and formations ready. Meanwhile, they forced the enemy to march across rivers, climb hills, and struggle with fatigue. When battle came, one side was fresh, the other was already broken. This is not laziness, it is calculation. Why fight an enemy at full strength when you can meet him half defeated? History repeats this law. When Caesar fought the Helvetii in Gaul, he built walls and trenches to block their path. They strained, starved, and stumbled into conflict while his legionnaires stood rested and prepared. He understood that the true battlefield is time itself, time that wears down the impatient. In life and business, the same rule holds. Henry Ford did not race other automakers with endless models and frantic changes. He simplified, standardized, and let his rivals burn themselves out chasing trends. By waiting at leisure while others labored, he preserved strength and struck with overwhelming efficiency. The lesson is this: prepare yourself, exhaust your enemy, and strike only when the balance has tilted in your favor. Power is not always speed. Sometimes it is the art of waiting while others destroy themselves. Loot a burning house. The fifth stratagem is ruthless. When your enemy is in chaos, strike without mercy. Do not waste energy fighting a man at his peak. Wait until he is wounded, distracted, or burning, then take everything. This comes from ancient campaigns where rebels rose against their rulers. When a city was already in flames from rebellion or disaster, rival states seized the moment. They did not waste their own strength. Why fight when the enemy's house is already burning? History rewards those who act when others hesitate. During the oil crashes of the 1870s, most refiners collapsed under falling prices. John D. Rockefeller did not. He saw their misery as his opportunity. While others begged banks for loans, he quietly bought their refineries at a fraction of their worth. His empire was built on the ashes of men who could not survive the fire. This law extends beyond war or business. When your rival makes a mistake, when a competitor is struck by scandal, when a man's guard is down, this is the time to advance. Power does not wait politely. The lesson is clear. Do not light the fire if you don't have to. But when it burns, be ready to take everything from those too weak to hold on. In life, as in war, fortune belongs to the man bold enough to loot the burning house, make a sound in the east, then strike in the west. This stratagem is about deception through distraction. When your enemy's eyes are fixed on one direction, your real blow should come from the opposite side. The story comes from ancient Chinese warfare. Generals would send troops east, making noise, lighting fires, and spreading rumors. The enemy rushed to defend that side, only to be struck in the west, where the true attack fell. Great commanders have always mastered this principle. Napoleon feinted attacks along the Rhine, then turned suddenly toward Italy. Caesar staged diversions to confuse the Gauls, forcing them to split their strength. By the time they realized where the real danger was, it was too late. The same law ruled the business empires of the industrial age. Cornelius Vanderbilt often pretended to withdraw from a trade route, letting rivals flood in with confidence. Then once their resources were stretched thin, he launched his real assault in another corridor. They defended shadows while he captured substance. In life, men are easily distracted by noise, by what seems urgent. But noise is often bait. The wise man learns to look past the obvious and ask, where is the silence? Where is the move no one is watching? That is where the true danger lies. So remember this law of power. The hand that waves in the east is never the one holding the knife. Create something from nothing. The seventh stratagem is about illusion, about turning emptiness into power. It means creating the appearance of strength, wealth, or opportunity where nothing actually exists until that illusion itself changes reality. In ancient times, generals used this to terrify enemies. They lit thousands of campfires with only a few men, making armies appear far larger than they were. Fear did the rest. An enemy who believes you are strong often collapses without a fight. This principle lives beyond the battlefield. Andrew Carnegie, when still a young and unproven steelmaker, would speak as if his company were already dominant. Bankers, believing his confidence, loaned him money. Customers, believing his reputation, placed orders. His illusion of power created actual power. Even artists and thinkers use this stratagem. Stephen Pressfield, in The War of Art, writes about turning pro before the world sees you as one. By acting as if you already are what you aim to be, you summon reality to catch up with belief. The world is ruled not by what is, but by what men believe to be. If you can create something from nothing in their minds, you control their choices, their fears, and their actions. Reality often follows the shadow you project. Master illusion, and you will master men. Openly repair the gallery roads, but sneak through the passage of Chenkang. This stratagem is about the art of misdirection. Show the enemy one path so openly, so obviously, that he believes it must be your plan, while your true advance comes from a hidden road. The story comes from the Han Dynasty. General Han Xin ordered his men to loudly repair an old road known as the Gallery Road, making it look like a major invasion route. The enemy, convinced of the deception, fortified that path heavily. Meanwhile, Han Xin's real army slipped through a hidden pass at Chenchang, striking where no one expected. This principle is ageless. In business, Sam Walton built Walmart in small towns that his competitors ignored. The big retailers fortified the gallery roads. The big cities, the obvious markets. Walton advanced quietly through the back roads until his empire surrounded them. Men are easily blinded by what they think they see. If you can give them a stage play to watch, workers repairing roads, armies marching, flashy announcements, they will rarely ask what lies behind the curtain. So remember, power is not only in force but in steering perception. Let your enemy fortify the road you never planned to take, while you move silently along the path to victory. Watch the fires burning across the river. This stratagem is about patience and opportunism. When two enemies clash, you do not rush in to join the fight. You wait at a distance, let them bleed each other dry, and then step in when both are weak. In ancient China, rival states often fell into civil war. Wise rulers did not intervene immediately. They stood on the far bank, watching the fires consume both sides. Only when exhaustion had done its work did they cross the river to claim what was left. History repeats this truth. J.P. Morgan grew powerful not by building new industries, but by stepping in after others had destroyed themselves in reckless competition. He stabilized railroads and steel companies once their owners had burned through their strength. By waiting for the flames to die down, he could take control at the lowest cost. Even Napoleon understood this law. In 1812, when Russia and Sweden fought, he waited, hoping both would exhaust themselves before he struck. The art of power is knowing when not to act, when to let others do your work for you. The lesson is clear. Energy is finite. Let your rivals waste theirs in fire and fury. Then when the moment is right, cross the river and collect the spoils. Patience in the face of chaos is not weakness. It is the most ruthless form of strength. Hide a knife behind a smile. The 10th stratagem reveals one of the darkest truths of power. Men are disarmed by kindness. A smile lowers their guard, but behind that smile you must carry the blade. In Chinese history, warlords would welcome rivals with wine, feasts, and promises of peace. While the enemy relaxed in false security, the hidden knife struck. Betrayal was masked by courtesy, and destruction delivered under the cover of friendship. This principle has echoed through every age. John D. Rockefeller often approached competitors with offers of cooperation. He spoke softly, smiled warmly, and gave them the sense of partnership. But behind that smile, he was preparing to absorb their business into Standard Oil, leaving them with nothing. The lesson is not about cruelty for its own sake. It is about timing. An open attack is expected and defended against. But a disguised attack, one cloaked in goodwill, is nearly impossible to resist. Even in personal life, this law appears. People reveal secrets, lower defenses, and make concessions when they feel liked. That is when influence cuts deepest. So remember, not every smile is innocent. Power often wears a pleasant mask, and the man who hides a knife behind his smile will always be more dangerous than the one who shows his blade openly. Sacrifice the plum tree to preserve the peach tree. This stratagem is about calculated loss. Sometimes to protect what truly matters, you must be willing to give up something of lesser value. The image is simple. When the orchard is threatened, you let the plum tree fall so that the peach tree, sweeter, more valuable, survives. In war, generals sacrifice small outposts or even whole divisions to preserve the heart of their army. The weaker branch is cut away so the stronger may thrive. History is filled with this wisdom. Andrew Carnegie sold off less profitable mills and products without hesitation, pouring all resources into steel, the peach tree of his empire. Rockefeller abandoned kerosene markets and declined to secure dominance in oil pipelines and refining. Both understood that clinging to everything is the surest path to losing everything. Even in personal battles, this law applies. Reputation, money, comfort, sometimes one must be sacrificed to protect power, influence, or survival. Men who cannot bear loss are destroyed by it. Men who can sacrifice strategically grow stronger through it. Do not measure value sentimentally. The plum may be beautiful, but if its fall preserves the peach, let it go. Power is built not only by what you win, but by what you are ruthless enough to abandon. Take the opportunity to pilfer a goat. This stratagem is about exploiting small chances. Not every victory is grand. Sometimes power is built by seizing small, overlooked gains, one goat at a time. The lesson comes from warlords who, when passing enemy villages, took whatever livestock or supplies were left unguarded. These little thefts, multiplied over time, weakened the enemy and strengthened their own armies. A goat here, a sack of grain there, and soon the balance of power shifted. History proves the same in empire building. Rockefeller never dismissed small opportunities. He began by trading in small lots of oil, buying barrels others ignored, negotiating tiny rebates from railroads. Yet these goats, insignificant to others, became the foundation of Standard Oil's dominance. Sam Walton, too, built Walmart not by conquering cities, but by capturing overlooked rural markets. Each little town was a goat. Each small gain added up until the herd was vast, and his rivals realized too late what had happened. Greatness is not only in seizing empires, but in never passing by a chance to take more, however small. Men who laugh at little gains are usually defeated by the man who takes them all. One goat may seem trivial, but 100 goats feed an army. Power belongs to the man who never walks past an unguarded prize. Stomp the grass to scare the snake. This stratagem is about flushing out hidden threats. When the enemy lurks in shadows, you don't strike blindly. Instead, you create a disturbance that forces him to reveal himself. In ancient China, armies suspected ambushes in tall grass. Rather than march in blindly, they sent soldiers to stomp through the fields, driving snakes into the open. Once revealed, the danger could be destroyed. Great leaders have used the same tactic. Julius Caesar, facing conspiracies, often floated false information to see who would react. Those who betrayed themselves were the snakes in the grass, exposed by their own movements. Even in business, this law holds true. Cornelius Vanderbilt would sometimes hint at moves he had no intention of making. His rivals, rushing to counter him, revealed their strategies and weaknesses. With the snakes out in the open, Vanderbilt struck for real. The lesson is sharp. The unseen enemy is the most dangerous. Do not charge blindly into traps. Disturb the ground, shake the grass, and let the hidden threats reveal themselves. So remember, in power, as in war, the first strike is not always to kill. Sometimes it is to expose. Once the snake shows its head, then, and only then, do you cut it off. Borrow a corpse to resurrect the soul. This stratagem is about using what is dead, discarded, or forgotten to serve your living purpose. When an idea, institution, or symbol has lost its power, you can revive it for your own gain. In Chinese history, generals would sometimes seize abandoned fortresses or revive the banners of fallen armies. What was thought dead returned as a weapon, striking fear into enemies who believed it gone forever. History is full of the same trick. Napoleon crowned himself emperor using the ancient symbols of Rome, resurrecting a dead empire's soul to legitimize his own power. Rockefeller, too, used the old structures of cooperation and trust, concepts already familiar to businessmen. to mask his domination of oil. By borrowing the corpse of respectability, he gave life to his empire. Even in personal life, this law can be applied. Old reputations, past alliances, even failed ventures, each can be revived at the right time to project strength. The past, though dead, still casts a shadow, and in that shadow you can build power. The lesson is this: do not fear what is dead. Instead, learn to resurrect it and make it fight for you. Men are haunted by memory. If you can control the ghosts, you control the living. So remember, power is not only in what is alive, but in your ability to borrow a corpse and breathe into it a new soul. Entice the tiger to leave its mountain lair. A tiger is strongest on its own ground, hidden in the shadows of the mountain. To face it, there is to invite death, but lure it down into the open plains, and its advantage is gone. Chinese generals mastered this art by offering bait, small victories, false retreats, tempting opportunities. The enemy, eager and overconfident, left the safety of their fortress or high ground, only to be surrounded and destroyed. Caesar did the same in Gaul. He provoked tribes to abandon their fortified hills by threatening villages and supply routes. Once they left their lairs, thinking they were the hunters, they found themselves prey. Cornelius Vanderbilt also understood this law in commerce. Rivals felt secure on their mountain lairs, local monopolies and protected routes. He tempted them with offers, deals, or seemingly open markets, and once they stepped out, he crushed them with his superior fleet and ruthless tactics. The tiger's mistake is pride, the belief that it can dominate anywhere. The man who creates the bait decides the battlefield, and on chosen ground, the tiger loses its fangs. In order to capture, one must let loose. Sometimes the tighter you grip, the more your enemy slips away. To capture fully, you must first create the illusion of freedom. In the wars of ancient China, commanders often loosened their hold on encircled foes, allowing them to believe there was a path of escape. Soldiers rushed out in disorder, abandoning formation and discipline, only to be cut down in the open once they had fled the trap. It is a principle as old as ambition itself. Andrew Carnegie used it in business negotiations, granting small concessions, appearing to yield, letting rivals think they had won. In truth, he was guiding them into positions where he held all the leverage. John D. Rockefeller, too, seemed at times to retreat, offering partnerships or buying competitors at generous terms. But those gestures of release only bound them tighter into Standard Oil system. What looked like freedom was the beginning of capture. The wise understand that pressure breeds resistance, but release breeds carelessness. To let loose is not to lose control. It is to let the enemy wander exactly where you want him until his capture is certain. Tossing out a brick to get a jade gem. A brick has little value, but in the right hands it can draw out a treasure. This stratagem is about offering something small, even worthless, to provoke a response that yields something far greater. In the tales of old China, generals would bait enemies with a trivial prize, perhaps a supply cart or an exposed unit of soldiers. When the opponent rushed in greedily, he revealed his position or fell into an ambush, trading strength for scraps. History offers countless mirrors. Inventors often released prototypes or partial ideas, letting others underestimate them or reveal their own improvements. Carnegie lured investors with limited shares in his steel ventures, a brick compared to what he truly possessed. But through their eagerness, he secured resources and influence beyond the initial offering. Rockefeller excelled at this too. He might concede a small market or yield a minor profit margin, but in doing so, he enticed competitors to reveal their weaknesses. What they thought was a gain was only the brick. The jade he drew out was total dominance of transportation, refining, and pipelines. Power is not always in the treasures you hold, but in knowing how to trade trifles for jewels. The man who throws out bricks with intention will always end up with gems in his hand. Defeat the enemy by capturing their chief. Armies may be vast, but they move on the will of one man. Cut off the head, and the body collapses. This stratagem is about striking at the center of power rather than wasting strength on the masses. Chinese campaigns often ended not in drawn-out battles, but in swift moves to seize the opposing commander. Once the leader was captured or killed, Soldiers scattered, unwilling to fight without direction. The most efficient victory came not through slaughter, but through precision. Caesar understood this when facing tribal coalitions. He targeted chieftains and kings, knowing that the loyalty of the people flowed through their leader. By removing one man, he conquered entire nations. Business followed the same law. When Rockefeller wanted to consolidate an oil region, he did not haggle with every small operator. He went after the strongest refiner, the man others looked to. Once that leader fell into his system, the rest followed willingly, their resistance broken before the fight even began. The truth is simple. Control belongs to the few who command the many. Seize those few, and the many no longer matter. Victory lies not in fighting every soldier, but in capturing the chief who makes them fight. Remove the firewood from under the pot. Every flame depends on its fuel. No matter how fierce a fire burns, take away the wood beneath it and it dies on its own. This stratagem teaches that the surest way to defeat strength is not to fight it directly, but to cut off its source. Chinese generals used this by targeting supply lines. An army could roar like a blazing pot, but once its food and water were gone, hunger and thirst did the work of swords. Victories came not from clashing head-on, but from starving the fire until it collapsed in ashes. The same truth defined modern empires. During the Civil War, blockades strangled the Confederacy more effectively than any single battle. Carnegie broke rivals not by contesting every contract, but by undercutting their access to raw materials and distribution. Rockefeller, more than anyone, mastered this law. He seized the railroads and pipelines, removing the fuel his competitors needed. Their flames went out while his fire roared higher. Power is rarely destroyed in a single strike. It withers when the lifeblood beneath it is drained away. Those who learn to remove the firewood never need to fear the blaze. Disturb the water and catch a fish. Calm water is clear. In it, every movement is visible, every danger easy to spot. But stir the river into turbulence, and chaos hides your hand. This stratagem is about creating disorder so that opportunities appear where none seem to exist. Ancient commanders knew that confused soldiers could be defeated by far smaller forces. Clouds of dust, sudden noises, or deliberate rumors unsettled armies, breaking their discipline before the first clash of swords. Once the water was muddy, the fish could be caught with ease. Caesar understood this in Gaul. He spread false intelligence, forcing tribes to move against shadows. By the time they realized the truth, their cohesion had dissolved, and his legions struck through the confusion. In business, men like Vanderbilt and Rockefeller often manipulated markets to disturb the waters. Stock prices, railroad tariffs, or sudden announcements would send rivals scrambling, panicked, and uncoordinated. Amid the frenzy, they moved calmly, scooping up the real prizes. Clarity favors the strong, but chaos favors the cunning. When the water is clear, the fish swim free. When it is disturbed, they fall into the net. Slough off the cicada's golden shell. The cicada escapes its predators by leaving behind its golden shell. What looks alive is only an empty husk, while the creature itself has flown away. This stratagem is about deception through abandonment, shedding what no longer serves you in order to survive and strike again. Chinese commanders used it by leaving camps intact, fires burning, banners flying, as if their armies still rested there. Enemies attacked with confidence, only to find themselves charging at shadows, while the real force had moved elsewhere to strike unopposed. This principle lived on in history's greatest players. Napoleon mastered the art of the feigned retreat, leaving behind equipment or even entire positions as bait, luring his foes into traps. Rockefeller often allowed certain ventures or markets to die in public view, letting rivals believe he had withdrawn, while in truth he had shifted resources into more profitable arenas. To cling too tightly is to be caught. The true strategist knows when to shed the shell, when to leave behind something gleaming but empty, while the living essence continues on elsewhere. The husk confuses the enemy, buys time, and creates the illusion of vulnerability. Power endures not by holding everything, but by knowing what to abandon and when. Shut the door to catch the thief. A thief runs swiftly when there is a path open, but trap him inside a sealed house, and all his speed means nothing. This stratagem is about closing every exit, leaving the enemy no way out, and then finishing him at your leisure. Chinese generals perfected this by letting an enemy penetrate deep, then slamming shut the passes behind him. Once surrounded, with food and reinforcements cut off, the enemy collapsed not from a single clash but from the slow tightening of the noose. It is the art of total enclosure. Caesar used it at Alesia, where he built fortifications not only to besiege the Gauls inside, but to hold off relief forces outside. Two walls, one facing in, one facing out. An iron trap with no escape. The proud tribes of Gaul, fierce in open battle, starved behind shut doors. In commerce, Rockefeller understood the same law. By seizing control of railroads and pipelines, he closed every avenue of distribution for rival refiners. They were shut in, unable to move their product, until surrender was their only option. When the doors are open, even a weaker enemy can run free. But once they are shut, the strongest foe is no more than a thief in a locked room, waiting to be caught. Befriend a distant state while attacking a neighbor. No empire can fight on every front at once. The wise understand that distant states make convenient friends, while nearby rivals must be broken first. In the Warring States period, rulers forged alliances with kingdoms far away, flattering them with gifts and promises of peace. These distant allies posed no immediate danger, but their friendship discouraged intervention. Meanwhile, the true war was waged against neighbors, those whose lands, resources, and proximity made them the greatest threat. Caesar moved in the same spirit. While fighting in Gaul, he courted distant tribes with diplomacy, assuring them of Roman friendship. This freed him to annihilate the tribes closest to his armies, one by one. The distant allies remained still while their neighbors fell. Rockefeller used a similar method in business. He offered cooperation and favorable terms to refiners in far-off regions, while targeting his fiercest rivals at home. By keeping distant interests calm, he could focus his full force on those next door. It is a simple law of power. Keep the far enemy close as a friend, so you may concentrate your blows on the neighbor who threatens you most. Befriend a distant state while attacking a neighbor. No empire can fight on every front at once. The wise understand that distant states make convenient friends, while nearby rivals must be broken first. In the Warring States period, rulers forged alliances with kingdoms far away, flattering them with gifts and promises of peace. These distant allies posed no immediate danger, but their friendship discouraged intervention. Meanwhile, the true war was waged against neighbors, those whose lands, resources, and proximity made them the greatest threat. Caesar moved in the same spirit. While fighting in Gaul, he courted distant tribes with diplomacy, assuring them of Roman friendship. This freed him to annihilate the tribes closest to his armies, one by one. The distant allies remained still while their neighbors fell. Rockefeller used a similar method in business. He offered cooperation and favorable terms to refiners in far-off regions, while targeting his fiercest rivals at home. By keeping distant interests calm, he could focus his full force on those next door. Keep the far enemy close as a friend, so you may concentrate your blows on the neighbor who threatens you most. Obtain safe passage to conquer the state of Guo. The tale comes from China's spring and autumn period. The state of Jin wished to strike Guo but couldn't reach it directly, so they asked the neighboring state of Yu for permission to march through its lands. Yu agreed, believing their request harmless. Once Jin's army was inside, they turned their weapons on Yu, conquering it before moving on to Guo. A polite request for passage can hide the intent of invasion. Cloaked in diplomacy, the army advances without resistance, and by the time the host realizes the danger, the enemy is already inside its walls. History is filled with echoes of this trick. During the Second World War, Germany assured Belgium of its neutrality, then asked for safe passage of troops. When allowed entry, those troops did not march peacefully. They stormed toward France through Belgian soil, bypassing France's defenses. Even outside of war, this pattern repeats. Explorers often entered foreign lands under the banner of science or trade. The British East India Company began as merchants granted passage and trading rights in India. Over time, their forts, soldiers, and administrators spread across the land until safe passage had become outright conquest. It is the danger of opening the gate too willingly. The visitor who asks politely may be the conqueror in disguise. Replace the beams with rotten timbers. This stratagem is about sabotage from within. A house may look solid, but if its beams are secretly replaced with rotten timbers, it will collapse under its own weight. Chinese statesmen often use this method not by attacking outright, but by undermining trust and structure inside their enemies' courts. Bribes, spies, and whispers rotted the beams. By the time the house came down, no open assault had been needed. Centuries later, the Byzantine Empire mastered this game. Rather than face powerful enemies in direct battle, emperors sent gold and promises into rival courts. Generals turned traitor, governors rebelled, and enemies broke apart without the Byzantines ever lifting a sword. Closer to our own age, this principle lived in the world of espionage. The Cold War was fought less by armies than by quiet sabotage. Institutions were infiltrated, loyalties eroded, false information planted. The structure of trust, the beams of nations, was attacked until cracks appeared in the very foundations. The brilliance of this stratagem lies in patience. The house does not fall today, nor tomorrow, but every day it grows weaker. By the time the enemy realizes what has happened, collapse is inevitable, and the conqueror has hardly spent his strength. Point at the mulberry tree. While cursing the locust tree, this stratagem is about indirect criticism, striking at one target while pretending to address another. By pointing at the mulberry tree but cursing the locust tree, a ruler could deliver his warning without openly confronting the person he meant to discipline. In imperial courts, officials often wrapped their advice or rebukes in allegory. To scold the emperor directly was dangerous, so they told stories about mythical kings or corrupt ministers of the past. Everyone understood the true meaning, yet the speaker escaped punishment because his words seemed to point elsewhere. We find the same practice in medieval Europe. Court jesters mocked kings through jokes about fools and neighbors, but everyone listening knew the barbs were aimed at the throne. Humor provided a shield for truth. Even in the modern world, politicians use this method. Instead of naming rivals outright, they speak of certain leaders, some companies, or a few nations. The audience fills in the blanks. The message lands, the power is exercised, but the speaker keeps plausible deniability. The strength of this stratagem lies in ambiguity. By cursing the locust tree while pointing at the mulberry, you strike without ever exposing yourself to the charge of open attack. Feign madness, but keep your balance. Madness frightens and confuses men. An opponent who cannot predict your actions hesitates, unsure whether to strike or retreat. This stratagem turns unpredictability into a weapon. You appear reckless, but inside you remain perfectly controlled. Chinese generals sometimes feign drunkenness or incompetence, lulling enemies into underestimating them. When the moment was right, the mask came off, and the strike was precise and devastating. In the ancient Mediterranean, Odysseus pretended to be insane when summoned to join the Trojan War. He yoked an ox and a donkey to his plow and sowed his fields with salt. Only when threatened with the death of his child did he drop the act, revealing his cunning. His ruse bought him time, and later at Troy, the same mind gave the world the Trojan horse. Centuries later, the Mongols under Genghis Khan often staged feigned disorder. Drunken camps, chaotic retreats, soldiers pretending to panic. Pursuers rushed in eagerly, only to be swallowed whole by ambush. The appearance of madness concealed balance, and balance turned to annihilation. It is a dangerous mask, but a powerful one. Those who appear insane bend the battlefield because fear and uncertainty are as deadly as any sword. Remove the ladder when the enemy has ascended to the roof. This stratagem is about trapping an enemy in a position where retreat is impossible. You let him climb to what seems like an advantage, but once he has committed, you remove the ladder and leave him stranded. In ancient campaigns, generals sometimes opened a path that drew invaders deep into hostile terrain. When the enemy marched in, bridges were burned or mountain passes sealed. What looked like progress was actually a prison, and the only way forward was into destruction. Cortés used this principle when he landed in Mexico. To prevent hesitation or retreat, he burned his own ships. His men, cut off from the sea, had no path back. Only conquest lay ahead. By removing the ladder, he forced total commitment, both for his army and against his enemy. During World War II, Stalin employed similar ruthlessness. As the Germans advanced into the Soviet Union, scorched earth tactics destroyed roads, railways, and supplies. The invaders found themselves deep in hostile land with no ladder back. Winter and hunger finished what the Red Army had begun. It is the art of cutting off escape. Once a man has climbed too high with no way down, his fall is certain, and his strength is spent in vain struggles on the roof. Deck the tree with false blossoms. Not every blossom is real, but from a distance, false flowers can be just as dazzling. This stratagem is about creating the appearance of wealth, strength, or beauty where little exists to mislead others into overestimating you. Rulers of old often decorated their armies with inflated numbers. Wooden dummies stood among soldiers, flags multiplied, drums thundered louder than their ranks deserved. The illusion of blossoms fooled scouts into reporting vast forces, making cautious enemies retreat without a fight. In Renaissance Italy, the Medici family understood this art. Long before their fortune was truly unmatched, they projected an aura of magnificence through lavish buildings, art patronage, and public rituals. Their tree was not yet full of fruit, but the blossoms dazzled Florence into treating them as the natural leaders of the city. In the 20th century, dictators like Mussolini staged elaborate parades with outdated weapons painted and polished to shine like modern steel. His Italy looked like a military powerhouse, but much of it was papier-mâché, false blossoms hiding a weak trunk. The power of illusion lies in perception. Men often act not on reality, but on what they believe to be real. A barren tree, if dressed well enough, can frighten rivals or seduce allies, at least long enough to gain the true strength it pretends to have. Make the host and the guest exchange roles. This stratagem is about turning a position of weakness into one of control. The guest arrives deferential, subject to the host's rules, but through subtle maneuvering, he takes over the household until the host himself is serving at the guest table. In Chinese history, wandering advisors sometimes entered courts as humble guests. They offered counsel, flattered kings, and gained trust. Slowly, they expanded influence over policy and armies until the ruler himself was a figurehead. The guest had become the true master. The pattern repeats across civilizations. In medieval Europe, the Pope invited kings to Rome as petitioners. Yet by the end of their visits, it was often the pontiff who dictated terms, wielding spiritual authority to bend monarchs to his will. The guest chair had become the throne. In the modern age, corporations have used the same method. A foreign company enters a country as a guest, welcome for investment and trade. Over time, its economic power grows, and soon the host nation finds itself dependent on the guest. The roles have reversed, and sovereignty bends beneath commerce. The brilliance of this stratagem lies in patience. The guest never storms the house. He settles in quietly until the host no longer notices the moment he ceded power. The beauty trap. Few weapons are sharper than desire. This stratagem uses beauty, charm, or pleasure to cloud judgment, distract focus, and bend men to your will. In the spring and autumn period of China, King Zhuge of Yue avenged his nation's humiliation by sending a woman famed for her beauty, Shi Shi, into the court of the enemy king. Enchanted, the king neglected affairs of state, leaving his kingdom weak and ripe for conquest. The beauty trap destroyed him more completely than any army could. History echoes with such snares. Cleopatra bent Roman power to her purpose through Caesar and later Mark Antony, entangling the fate of empires in her allure. In Japan, rival daimyo often sent courtesans to distract enemy generals, keeping them from their duties while battle crept closer. But the beauty trap is not only about flesh. Pleasure of any kind can be bait, wealth, luxury, indulgence. In the Cold War, intelligence agencies used lavish gifts, parties, and temptations as snares, luring targets into indiscretions that compromise them forever. The brilliance of this stratagem is its subtlety. Steel meets steel with resistance, but beauty disarms without a sound. The victim often believes he is the hunter, only to discover too late that he was the prey. The empty fort strategy. Sometimes the best defense is no defense at all, or at least the appearance of it. This stratagem turns weakness into strength by making the enemy doubt what he sees. The classic tale comes from Zhuge Liang, the master strategist of the Three Kingdoms. Outnumbered and with no troops to defend a city, he ordered the gates thrown open. He sat calmly on the wall, playing his zither, while a few men swept the streets. The advancing army, certain it was a trap, turned and fled. An empty fort, defended only by confidence, saved him. The power lies in psychology. Boldness where weakness should exist confuses the mind. Hannibal used similar tricks against the Romans, masking small forces with elaborate displays to make them seem larger. Even in World War II, the Allies built entire ghost armies of inflatable tanks and wooden planes to fool German reconnaissance, convincing them that strength stood where in truth there was nothing. The empty fort thrives on the enemy's doubt. If he believes his eyes, he attacks and finds nothing. If he doubts his eyes, he retreats from nothing. Either way, his certainty collapses, and your weakness becomes your shield. Let the enemy's own spies sow discord in the enemy camp. Nothing corrodes an army faster than suspicion. This stratagem turns the enemy's eyes inward, making him see traitors in every shadow until he destroys himself from within. In ancient wars, generals sometimes captured spies and then sent them back with carefully planted lies. A single rumor could spread through camps like fire. Whispers of betrayal, doubt about commanders, fears of rebellion. Soldiers who once trusted each other now looked over their shoulders, and discipline crumbled without a blow being struck. The Mongols perfected this art. Before launching attacks, they spread stories through merchants and travelers, hinting that local leaders plotted treason or colluded with foreign powers. By the time their armies arrived, cities were already torn apart by suspicion. Even in modern times, intelligence agencies have thrived on this principle. During World War II, double agents fed the Germans false reports, leading to paranoia within their own ranks. High command wasted resources chasing phantom conspiracies while real threats advanced elsewhere. The deadliest weapon is not always a sword or a cannon. Sometimes it is a whisper placed in the right ear, turning allies into enemies and leaving the army broken before the battle begins. Inflict injury on oneself to win the enemy's trust. This stratagem is about sacrifice as deception. By wounding yourself, literally or figuratively, you convince others of your sincerity, lowering their guard until the true strike can be delivered. Chinese tales tell of generals who cut their own flesh or punished themselves publicly to feign loyalty. Enemies believed no man would harm himself for deceit, and so they welcomed the penitent into their confidence. When the moment came, betrayal struck from within. The story of Wu Zixu is often told. Flogged and humiliated, he pretended submission, only to rise later and bring his enemies to ruin. The scar that made him look weak was the very weapon of his revenge. This principle has echoed across cultures. In the Middle Ages, conspirators sometimes staged beatings or arrests to prove their innocence. Their enemies, convinced of their suffering, let them near. Julius Caesar himself was wary of Brutus because of his ties to Pompey, but Brutus's visible humility and gestures of loyalty convinced Caesar to keep him close, until the Ides of March. In power, false vulnerability is more convincing than strength. Men will question your ambition when you boast, but rarely when you bleed. Chain stratagems. One move alone may not win a war, but when stratagems are linked together like chains, each prepares the way for the next until the enemy is bound without escape. Chinese commanders wove deception in layers. A false retreat might lure the enemy into pursuit where an ambush awaited. That ambush would drive them into a fortified position that looked vulnerable, but was only bait for yet another trap. Each step looked like an isolated trick, but together they formed an unbreakable sequence. The Allies in World War II used this method brilliantly. Operation Bodyguard was not one deception, but a chain of them. Phantom armies with inflatable tanks, false radio traffic, double agents feeding lies. Each deception reinforced the other until the Germans became convinced the D-Day landings would strike at Calais, not Normandy. By the time the truth was revealed, it was too late. In politics and business, the same holds. A leader may first feign weakness, then offer a concession, then extend a false alliance. Each move small on its own, but together they guide rivals step by step into submission. By the end, what looked like a series of accidents reveals itself as a carefully forged chain. The genius of this stratagem lies in orchestration. A single ruse can be spotted, a single lie uncovered, but a web of deceptions, linked one to another, ensnares even the wary. If all else fails, retreat. The final stratagem is the most difficult for proud men to accept. When every plan fails, when strength is broken and no path leads forward, the only road to survival is retreat. In Chinese history, generals who recognized the right moment to withdraw preserved their armies for future battles. Those who refused, who clung to honor or stubbornness, left their men dead on the field and their states in ruin. Survival itself became the victory. Xenophon's Anabasis tells of 10,000 stranded Greek mercenaries deep in Persia. Surrounded and leaderless, they did not throw themselves into hopeless battle. Step by step, retreat became their triumph as they marched across hostile lands back to the sea. What looked like defeat was, in truth, endurance. In modern war, too, retreat has often been the seed of ultimate victory. After Dunkirk, the British Army returned across the Channel, battered but alive. That retreat bought the time needed for Britain to fight another day and eventually to return to the continent in force. Retreat is not surrender. It is recognition that power must bend in order not to break. To withdraw at the right time is not cowardice. It is the wisdom of living to fight again.